Deep within the cold hinterlands of Canada, guarded by a gaggle of angry Canadian geese, lies a tome, known only as the Canuckonomicon. It contains the history of the weird and forgotten of Canada, and today we shall open it up and see what lies inside. Now, how's that?
Must be the Halloween episode.
Yeah. So welcome back, everyone, to the Canuckonomicon. I am Benjamin Junior Wandio. I'm joined here by my dad / producer. What do you call yourself nowadays?
I'm just your producer.
Todd Dirty Clyde Wandio.
Salutations.
Yeah. So today, I've noticed we haven't done anything weird this season yet so far.
No, it's all been white bread.
It's all been very, legit history stuff.
And I mean, we have more legit history coming up, so...
We sure do.
Yeah.
And I decided to delve into my archives of strangeness that I had saved for when I was doing research for last season, and I came across a little story. So, as I mentioned back in my Falcon Lake incident episode that I did with Tap Snaps, Canada kind of has this rich history of UFO sightings. We have a bizarrely high number of sightings per capita in Canada. The wide open skies of the Great White North seem to be a hotspot for unusual activity. So I have to ask, Dirty Clyde, have you ever seen anything?
No, I saw a meteorite once. Coming down close.
Yeah.
But only once.
Yeah, I was... couple weeks ago, I guess more than almost over a month ago now, I was heading down to Red Deer with a friend to watch some wrestling, and on our way home that night, I was driving and the whole sky just lit up, like for a brief second, and I was like freaking out, like what just happened? And he just looks at me, I just saw a meteor crash, man. It was like not far from us at all.
Wow.
Like it was black. And then the whole sky was blue, like it was daylight.
Yeah.
It was apparently we had an airburst between Red Deer and Edmonton there. So.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty cool. So that's the most unusual thing I've seen in the sky, but maybe that's because we're not in Manitoba. Apparently, Manitoba gets a lot of weird crap.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, and so Falcon Lake's in Manitoba. And it remains a very unique occurrence. It has reported direct contact with an unidentified vessel. Lots of verified, information that went into that, as we discussed in that episode. And as I've discussed with you twice, because the 2 times we recorded that episode.
Yeah, we recorded it twice and you recorded it once.
That's right. But most incidents in Canada, like most UFO incidents worldwide, kind of fit into the Nocturnal Lights category. So I can't remember how much I got into it on my version of the recording that I did, but there are 2 major types of UFO sightings. We have daylight discs, which are exactly what they sound like. They're the more rare of the 2 types of sightings. They're typically disc-shaped objects or other unidentified objects that are spotted during the daylight, hence their name. And the other big one is nocturnal lights. Nocturnal lights are the most frequent sightings, and they're exactly what they sound like. They're lights in the sky, or sometimes hovering above the ground, spotted at nighttime. Which is probably why they're the most common ones. Daylight discs are the ones you'll see most often in UFO documentaries and books and stuff, because they're a little more dramatic and a little more mysterious. But more commonly, these nocturnal lights are what people are actually seeing. So they could be orbs, bulbs, or balls rather, flashes. Sometimes they're flying in formation. Sometimes they're hovering above the ground, zipping around weirdly. But there's a lot of really mundane explanations for what they could be. They could be satellites, aircraft, like you mentioned, meteorites. Swamp gas is a commonly thrown around one. There's that lake, I can't remember where it is, but at a certain time of the year it releases gases from deep inside which illuminate and look like fireballs shooting out of the lake. It's really bizarre.
And you would think, Manitoba with the millions of lakes there, I mean, the whole province practically, than for the southern portion, is lakes.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
well,
whether that contributes
honestly,
to it or not, in terms of it being...
I think there's something else I think that contributes a lot to it. Manitoba is where a lot of our Air Force is based out of.
Right.
So we have a lot of like military aircraft and such that goes through the area. Yeah, and other than that, I couldn't really tell you much about why, but we'll be discussing today what was kind of one of the most famous, what we call a flap. So a flap is a series of UFO sightings of usually similar UFOs located in a small area over a very short period, well, over a long period of time rather. But it's a lot of sightings. Most flaps will last 1 to 2 weeks, so you'll get hundreds of sightings over the course of 1 to 2 weeks in a small area. We're going to be discussing the Charlie Red Star flap.
You like it because it sounds First Nations.
It's not. It's just that's just what they called it. We'll get a bit into that, but this UFO is actually pretty unique because even during flaps, most UFO sightings, you can't just go out and see one. In fact, if you're setting out to find a UFO, you're almost guaranteed not to find one. Most UFO sightings happen to people who aren't looking for UFO sightings. They're just out doing their daily business or whatever, maybe hiking or whatever, and they'll see something weird.
Right.
So, to give some examples of flaps that have happened in the past, there's the 1946 Scandinavian ghost rocket sightings, where there was a number of unidentified objects that were seen in the skies over the Scandinavian countries. That one actually got so bad that the Swedish defense staff became worried that there was some sort of like Soviet invasion happening. I think one of the most famous flaps is the 1966 flap in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Do you know what that one was?
No.
That's the Mothman prophecy.
Oh.
So that one was accompanied by sightings of Mothman, men in black, so unusual men dressed in black suits going around acting weird. Not Will Smith. Actual stories of men in black tend to be a lot weirder and a lot creepier. They're not government agent type stories. They tend to be more like, oh, this is like a guy wearing a skin suit, like Edgar in Men in Black.
Oh.
Yeah. Canada's flap, though, was pretty unusual. So a bit more about Manitoba. UFO sightings in Manitoba go back over 200 years. The first recorded sighting occurred in 1792 when David Thompson, yes, that David Thompson, and Andrew Davies spotted a meteor they described as globular, crashing into the ice of a river in northern Manitoba like a, quote, massive jelly. Chris Rutkowski, who is the author, one of the co-authors of the book When They Arrived about the Falcon Lake incident, has really deeply studied the topic. So if you're interested in Canadian UFO stuff, Chris Rutkowski, Rutkowski, really great guy to look into. He's my favorite kind of UFO researcher where he keeps a healthy amount of skepticism and is willing to kind of look at more reasonable explanations for what could have happened, and I think he does a great job overall.
Okay.
But rather than going over the whole history of UFO sightings in Manitoba, let's skip right ahead to the years 1975 and 1976. So, from 1975 to 1976, a series of sightings baffled and amazed the people of Manitoba, especially the town of Carman. Have you ever been to Carman?
No, I've never been to Manitoba.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I swear you would have been there at least once. I've been there twice.
I have no.
Oh no, I only went there once. Never mind.
I have no reason to have been there.
I guess. You've never driven through on your way to Ontario?
Never been to Ontario.
Oh, I thought you went with Uncle John once.
No.
I guess I was wrong.
No. Yeah, I was gonna. Never did.
So at this point, 1975, it's been 9 years since the Falcon Lake incident. And it was generally believed by people in the parapsychological and budding ufology fields that UFOs, quote-unquote, found you. In other words, sightings like Michalak's were the result of people being in the wrong place at the wrong time and were accidental. A person couldn't go seeking out a UFO sighting. But the incident that was about to occur in Manitoba is pretty unique in that you could literally drive out to Carman, Manitoba and see the UFOs.
Okay.
In fact, one of the most famous Nocturnal Lights recordings that we have comes from this flap. A local television station from Winnipeg went out and recorded what would become some of the most famous nocturnal light footage in history as a result of this unusual behavior of the lights. Grant Cameron, author of the book Charlie Red Star, which is honestly one of the only books covering this specific flap, actually did this in May of 1975. Their first trip, they were witness to the great cosmological event of watching Venus set across the horizon, but not much else. They were actually pretty convinced that this was all people had been talking about. They had seen Venus, which this is more common than you think. People see Venus and think they've seen a UFO because we're not used to actually seeing Venus in the sky.
Well, it is one of the brightest, quote-unquote, stars.
Yeah, and it only shows up at certain times of the year.
Right.
Because of the way of how slowly Venus rotates.
And it's usually down on low on the horizon, which is, I can see how people would go, oh, that must be hovering.
Yeah. So, at this point, Cameron and his friends are pretty much convinced that's all people were seeing was Venus. And were turning in for the night. But then they saw something. A red, pulsing, bouncing object cruising across the sky. It was very distinct, and I've seen footage. It's a pretty distinct object. As a resident of Carman, Art Stagg said, "Once you see the thing, you know it. Mm-hmm. When you see this thing once, you never forget it. Just the way, the heartbeat of the thing. It's a luminous light. You'd like to see through it, but you can't." Now, oh, go ahead.
No, that's interesting.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying something.
No, it's my vocalization.
Ah.
Aha.
Now, here's something about Grant Cameron and why I'm going to say I kind of have been taking everything he says with a grain of salt because he's a bit of a weird guy. If it wasn't for the TV crew and the fact that Cameron's book is almost entirely just eyewitness accounts and not a whole lot of commentary, I probably wouldn't be using it. Mm-hmm. Because Cameron... Okay, well, I like Chris Rutkowski, but he hasn't written much on this sighting himself. He has kind of the mind of a skeptic, but he keeps an open mind. He doesn't try to put information into his sightings that isn't there to begin with. Many people will refer to him as what we call a nuts and bolts UFO researcher. So, a nuts and bolts UFO researcher is somebody who they go out, they record the sightings, they get whatever kind of scientific data they can get, and That's what they have. They don't try to like theorize about different races of space aliens or stuff like that. And Grant Cameron actually used to be one of those. And as far as I can tell, at the time he was writing this book, he still mostly was. But I will say his interest in UFOs started from the rather dubious field of parapsychology. Mm-hmm. What do you know about parapsychology?
Those are the ghost chasers.
Ghost chasing's a part of it, yeah. But we're also talking psychic powers, telekinesis, telepathy, that sort of weird
the study of the
stuff.
Unexplained. And
yeah,
in a more, I don't think it's metaphysical sense, but trying to make science out of.
It's trying to make science out of metaphysics.
Yeah.
Like, you're not wrong when you use the word metaphysics, because metaphysics is a huge part of parapsychology. The idea of, like, Swedenborgian space and all sorts of weird things fall under the umbrella term of parapsychology.
Right.
And it was really, really big in the 70s. And even more so in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
It was a almost legitimate field, but not quite. Well, there's a lot of experimentation with drugs trying to reach like a heightened consciousness, that sort of thing. It's a pretty dubious field, and so I tend to be really cautious with anybody who's coming out of there as a UFO researcher.
Right.
So when Grant Cameron's writing this book, he's still, like, he's obviously got a lot of that parapsychological, mindset. But since this first sighting, which I should point out, like, he went out looking for Charlie Red Star in 75 and 76 because he was studying parapsychology and all these reports had been coming out of the area, and so he wanted to have a UFO experience. But we're going to fast forward a lot here, over 25 years, in fact, to February 26, 2012, when Grant Cameron experiences what he called a mental download event, where apparently he received a psychic download of information from aliens.
Well, yeah, because he's that important.
So this has led to his new theory, and what he's been focusing a lot of his study on now is that modern music, scientific development, modern technology are the results of aliens inspiring people via mental downloads, similar to the one he had.
But he's aware of it.
Yes.
Everyone else isn't. They just wake up and they suddenly have
Yeah,
it.
and they have this new information in their heads, I guess. Or they think it's God or whatever. It's totally bizarre.
It so cheapens the human condition, doesn't it?
That's so much about like, what's it called? That show on History Channel. With the guy with the big hair.
Oh,
Ancient Aliens.
Ancient Alien Theory, yeah.
Yeah, Ancient Alien Theory is basically looking at something incredible that humans did and saying, there is no way humans could have done that.
Yeah, yeah.
Build the pyramids? Humans can't do that. We can't lift bricks that big.
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously cranes are a thing that don't exist, nor are ramps and wheels.
Yeah. No, aliens must have done it for us.
Yeah. Oh, or my favorite one was they were studying some ruins in South America, and it's like, this brick is so evenly carved, they must have used a laser. It's like, according to who? And all the actual scientists are looking at it saying, no, humans carved this. It's math.
Yeah.
We have that. It's a thing we're capable of inventing.
Because science.
Yeah. So getting back to 1975, 1976, talking about Charlie Red Star, we have this red glowing orb that has started appearing. And I think what I found the most interesting about Charlie Red Star was some of the people involved in it. So many of the sightings were made from what was called the Friendship Field Airport, which is on the south side of Carman, and was owned by Anthony and Rachel Britton. Anthony Britton was well known for restoring Second World War airplanes, including a reconditioned Hawker Hurricane, which Anthony allegedly flew in the film The Battle of Britain. I couldn't confirm this. There was no list of the pilots who were flying aircraft in that film.
Okay.
It's a real movie, though. I did verify that the movie is indeed real. But I couldn't find any information about where the planes came from, though I will say there aren't that many reconditioned Hawker Hurricanes out there. So it's very likely that he had, in fact, been one of the pilots on that show. Mm-hmm. I have actually seen the Hawker Hurricane that he's talking about, which now resides in the Brandon, Manitoba Commonwealth Air Training Museum, where I went sometime in the early 2000s for a mission trip, and was given so as part, or not a mission trip, it was a youth gathering. And as part of the youth gathering, our youth groups had to go out and help out in the community, and I was, as part of my youth group, given the task of cleaning bird shit off of old airplanes. And so I'm 90% sure I cleaned bird shit off of Anthony Britton's Hawker Hurricane.
That's awesome. That's a connection.
Yeah.
You have a connection to history.
Apparently. So as a result, Anthony Britton becomes something of a central figure in this flap. He actually went so far as to later claim that an Apollo 15 astronaut, whom he did not name, actually claimed to have seen a UFO land on the moon while he was up there. Now, Anthony clarified that this astronaut told him it was top secret, and that if anyone asked him about it afterwards, he would have to claim that he said no such thing. In other words, Anthony's claim is 100% completely unverifiable and dubious.
Yeah, I mean...
And so, this is one of the central figures of the Charlie Red Star flap.
Okay.
Is Anthony Britton.
So maybe a bit of hyperbole.
Yeah. Now, like I said, that the sightings were happening, not at all in doubt here. We have video footage of the object. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I can send it over to you. It'll be linked to it. Will be in our description. But yeah, I can send it over to you afterwards, and you can take a look for yourself. The airfield became the center of sightings because, as the result of being an airfield, the region around it's very clear. It offered a good view of the sky, which made spotting Charlie, as the UFO would come to be known, much easier. The name Charlie was used very early on. In fact, in almost all discussion of the UFO, especially around Carman and the surrounding communities, almost no one actually called it a UFO. They called it, almost from day one, Charlie Red Star, or just Charlie for short. I think they were calling it Charlie Red Star because that's what it looks like. It looks like a red star that's bouncing around near the ground. According to Grant Cameron, newspapers and media, it had initially been referring to it as a UFO, but then eventually they started calling it Charlie as well, and even started using the terms he and him instead of it when referencing the object.
Right.
So Charlie became quite personified early on. It was ascribed with personality. It was thought of as being kind of mischievous. And people around town didn't actually really seem to care what Charlie was. While most of them suspected that Charlie was extraterrestrial in origin, they didn't really seem to care one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it had almost kind of taken on a bit of a folk creature quality. It was an exciting, unusual thing that was, as far as anyone could tell, completely harmless, and just kind of hung around in the sky and looked neat, and people could come and see it. Charlie was perceived as mischievous and lazy in equal measures. He was thought of as lazy because he moved quite slowly across the sky on an almost nightly basis. But if anyone actually tried to chase Charlie, he might just up and disappear or dodge and weave to evade being followed. So there's a few things that are similar all across all the sightings of Charlie Red Star. Charlie always seemed to fly by the town between the months of April and July in both 1975 and 1976. Most other flaps only last about 2 weeks. So not only did this one occur over 2 years, it occurred over several months in those 2 years.
Right. And was it...
So we're looking at a very unusually long flap.
So were these nightly sightings during the periods?
As far as I can tell, pretty much. People would go outside and wait to see Charlie.
Okay.
So it was at least regular enough that you knew when to go out.
Yeah.
Charlie was very slow, reportedly moving at speeds between 20 and 100 kilometers an hour, which is a pretty wide spread, but for a UFO, this is actually incredibly slow.
Yeah.
Most UFOs are described as like moving impossibly fast or at supersonic speeds. On top of that, Charlie was reported at being below 400 meters up, which is also extremely low for a UFO. Most are so high you can't really tell how far away they are.
Yeah.
So we're looking at an extremely slow-moving, low object of some sort.
Right.
Repeated sightings of Charlie were common. So this wasn't just like you'd go out, you'd see Charlie once, and that'd be the only time you personally would ever get to see Charlie. During the flap, people would literally just go outside and watch. You could set your watch by him. There are people who have dozens of individual sightings. Just those sightings which were reported numbered more than 80 a year for the 2 years that Charlie was around. So that's 160 sightings.
Right.
And most people probably didn't bother reporting him for the same reason you don't, or for the same reason that you probably didn't call it Fish and Wildlife every time you spotted that great horned owl that lived in our backyard back in Stony Plain.
Right.
It was cool and unusual, but was there any reason to report it?
No.
Not really. Nah, I mean, Charlie Red Star, if people didn't know about it by that point, they weren't ever going to know about it, so there wasn't much point in calling up, the Air Force every time they saw the damn thing.
Right. Well, it's kind of interesting, though, that there is no Air Force account of it.
This is the thing. There might be, but I didn't personally dig it up. Because, like I said, when I was doing research on this, there's one book that we have on it. And he's got, cops listed in there.
Okay.
We'll talk a bit about an officer's sighting, an RCMP officer who made a sighting. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was Air Force information about it, but not that I personally found in my research.
Okay.
One of the first sightings of Charlie Red Star was on May 27th, 1975, by a woman named Darlene Hebert. Her father's friend had called the house they were staying at, saying that he saw a red object heading towards them. They were staying at the Bourgeois house. Darlene said she saw the object land in the pasture outside the house. The whole house had been awoken by what they described as a loud, shrill noise, when this red object touched down. Darlene's mother said she had never heard anything like it before. According to Darlene, the house's front room was bathed in red to the point she thought whatever was making the noise had actually set fire to the house.
Oh.
Darlene was so scared by what she saw and heard that she allegedly spent 3 weeks sleeping on an air mattress outside her parents' bedroom. The following months would see 2 flaps over their course, and in June, people were lining the Pembina Valley to watch Charlie Red Star fly across the border from North Dakota into southern Manitoba. So this is also quite a long stretch of space that Charlie was flying across.
Right.
According to Cameron's book, Constable Ian Nicholson, an RCMP officer who was stationed at Carman at the time, gave the following eyewitness report of the object. It was off to the northwest. I'd say it was 3 to 4 miles away, about 1,000 feet up. There was an oval-shaped light. There was a white X-shaped halo around it, but not connected to it. The red was the color of a traffic safety light or a stoplight. So we have quite a distinct, bright red light that was flying about 1,000 feet, so just under 400 meters off the ground.
Right.
Francis Stagg also describes the sighting. It was just a big red ball. It was just like a heartbeat. It was pulsating. It didn't make any sound at all, and it was very low. The timing of the pulsation wasn't too regular or anything. It was like a heartbeat. That's the only way I can describe it, and it was so red. We have another sighting by Jeanette Frost, who was a resident of the community of Sperling. And she had so many sightings that she was actually keeping a journal of all of them. She described it as being lower than the elevator, referencing a grain elevator. It was as red as could be. It was just going up and down as these things go. It was going up and down, and it rose up at an elevator and down the other side. It was so stupid. It seemed that it would even wobble from side to side. It was really an odd-looking thing, but it was as red as could be. This was definitely a disc-shaped sort of thing. Which is just like the most prairie way to describe something.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's again, it's not people claiming that it is something. They're accepting that it.
No,
they're accepting that it is an object, and they're just watching.
Yeah.
It's a curiosity.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like it's just such a little kind of almost fad surrounding it. People coming out, lining these valleys, these roadways to watch this thing fly over. It was just kind of like something to do on an afternoon other than sit and listen to the CBC on the radio, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was 75. I mean, you had lots of television. You had, lots of radio, lots of...
Well, but out in Carman, Manitoba?
Yeah, well, you're right. They're probably... FM was...
There'd probably be some. Yeah. But you're probably not getting cable out there yet.
No, probably not. I mean, some places still don't have cable here.
Yeah. And so, like, you're watching the CBC. It's about probably what you got. Or whatever local stations are in the area. Like I said, there was a couple local television stations that came down from Winnipeg. So they're also in southern Manitoba here. So, what are some possibilities as to what this could have been? So, aside from that first sighting, and by that first sighting, I mean the one where it supposedly landed, and I honestly, that's one person reporting something like that, and that's also the only sighting I could find where it was described as having a noise. Almost all the other sightings note specifically that it's silent. That it doesn't make any noise. So, almost all the sightings of the object note that it's a pulsing red light that bobs and weaves and moves relatively slowly across the sky and makes no noise. So I looked up the stats of ultralight aircraft as to how high and how fast an ultralight has to fly. They actually have pretty low maximum heights and have safe flight speeds in the same range as the speeds given for Charlie Red Star, as in specifically between 30 and 100 kilometers an hour is a safe kind of lower range for an ultralight aircraft. And I should note that a lot of the speeds that we have are because people would chase it in their cars.
Right.
and they could keep up with it. So it would follow that someone piloting a gyroplane in Canada would probably also want to avoid the more extreme seasons, which gives us our times of between April and July. Much after July, like even August, you could probably push, and some of the sightings did go as late as August. But once you start getting into September, October, November, it starts getting colder and a little more difficult to maintain a safe flight. And anything before April is definitely going to be too cold.
Yeah.
February, March are probably right out. You're talking risk of icing up on your wings and stuff like that. So we're looking at a April to August kind of good safe flight season for a gyroplane or an ultralight. So could you put a red light on an ultralight? Quite possibly. I honestly think that it's entirely possible that this was somebody playing maybe a prank that kind of took off, got a lot of attention, and so they just kept doing it for fun.
Yeah, I'm just curious because of the intensity of the red light.
Yeah,
It seems
and
seems hard to manufacture that kind of power in a light because it'd have to be battery operated, and I can't think of any other source of light that the guy could have had on his plane. But
on his little plane.
yeah, but it does make for a plausible explanation.
I would say the one that I have the hardest time with for this, and I should point out, this is my theory, the ultralight, is that description of it going up and down those grain elevators. I don't know if you could get enough climb on something like a gyroplane or an ultralight to really safely do that. Possibly, if you're a very skilled pilot, but I just don't know. I don't know enough about piloting to be able to say for sure. I just know the stats I was able to find, and I don't even know if Jeanette Frost is describing a hard vertical climb and descent, or if it's more of a kind of a gentle slope, which would make a lot more sense.
Right.
For something like an ultralight. There's also sightings that describe it as disc-shaped. There's a number of sightings that describe it as having a dome on it. That makes it a little harder to put into the realm of an ultralight or a gyroplane. But then there's also the fact that this is in 1975 to 1976. Yes, this is the prairies, but they've seen movies. And at this point, UFO sightings, or UFOs, are appearing in film and television. They're part of the zeitgeist. This is already after Star Trek, I'm pretty sure. Definitely around the same time as Star Wars.
We're looking at the first Star Trek movies coming around the bend, I think, in 78 or something.
Yeah. So this is already, science fiction's already pretty common and out there. So it's possible people see this light and then they start embellishing. They want to stick a dome on it. They want to make it a little more exciting and a little more of a UFO type thing.
Right.
So it's hard to say if people are just misremembering, or maybe they have their first sighting and they start reading books on UFOs. Like I said, ufology was becoming quite the field at this point.
Oh, it was huge when I was in school. I would have been in 75. I would have been in grade 8, and our library was full of books on UFOs.
Oh yeah, we're looking at 9 years after Point Pleasant. with the Mothman Prophecies book being one of the first big ufology books released. And that was in 1966, so we're well after that already.
Well, and the Von Daniken, the Chariots of the Gods, and so the ancient alien astronaut theory was already out there. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was already part of the popular sort of attitude of the time, the consciousness where UFOs were real. People just accepted that they were real. So, people didn't even really question it and say, "Oh, that's nothing. That's just lights in the sky." People actually accepted that. Oh, yeah, of course there's UFOs.
Yeah. Cameron's book has literally hundreds of sightings recorded in it, so I'm not going to go through them all. But there's definitely enough there to say that they all are describing similar incidents, and I don't think that's in anybody's... I don't think anybody's questioning that about the Charlie Red Star sighting. Mm-hmm. There are also number of sightings that are fishermen's tales or stories that have been embellished and expanded on to make them more remarkable than they actually were. Especially a lot of the sightings that were coming from Anthony Brinton. Mm-hmm. Almost all of the more colorful sightings were from Anthony Brinton.
What's interesting though? I'm just thinking about him, and I'm thinking, if it was a hoax, and
he's the guy.
Your ultralight theory, he's the guy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too.
Right? And he's the one embellishing the stories. So whereas other people are simply giving eyewitness accounts, he's embellishing the story to make it bigger than it was before. He was probably having a good time. If that's the explanation.
Yeah. So he's the guy that if I were to do a really deep dig into this, I would want to get interviews with him. I'd want to, find out everything I could. Did the guy even own an ultralight? Anything like that.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't have the resources to do that because I can't get out to, Carman, Manitoba to look up, pilot ownership records.
Right. I wonder if a lot of those are digitized now.
Possibly.
Most archives, I think, have been digitized, so you end up looking at you're looking at microfiche, right? So it's basically just snapshots taken of documents.
Yeah.
Although they may not even keep those kinds of documents.
Exactly, right? So another story that I plan to do eventually is on a fellow from Golden, British Columbia. And I was at a museum there speaking with a woman, and she had to do, because she has done a whole bunch of research on him, and she had to go out and find old hospital records and stuff on him, and it was apparently quite a hassle to try and get a hold of a lot of them.
It's harder now with Freedom of Information Privacy Act. Because people's personal information is sacred almost in this day and age, where before you could just get those. If it's part of public record, you have direct access to it. Now people have to give signed consent and all that stuff. So
it's both easier and harder.
Yes,
because you can make a Freedom of Information request. I don't know as much about what it's like in Canada because I just haven't listened to a lot of journalists who have had trouble with it in Canada. Mm-hmm. But in the States, it's stuff you have to know specifically what form you're looking for.
Right.
You can't just request all forms of this type from this time or any form with this guy's name on it. You have to know the specific type of form you're looking for. And I imagine it's probably pretty similar in Canada because otherwise though the archivists who are getting this information for you, they know where specific forms are, and if you have a name and a specific form, they can get it for you.
Right.
But they're not there to do the research for you.
Yeah. Which to me, you know, doing research, you don't necessarily know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know who you're looking for, but you don't know where you might find it. And
and it makes it difficult for journalists a lot of the time, because it's like, okay, I know that this guy was, say, you know, took an ambulance somewhere, but do I remember the specific kind of form you have to fill out for an ambulance ride?
Right.
or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It often comes up, especially when you're dealing with like corporate stuff and legal proceedings and such. But that's all beside the point. So just some food for thought. Anthony Brinton, pilot. This thing moves like an ultralight. Kind of wonder if it was an ultralight piloted by Anthony Brinton.
I wonder.
Which isn't illegal, I should point out. So this isn't libel. I'm not accusing him of doing something illegal.
No.
It doesn't even seem like he was making money off it, just giving a fun story for people to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It certainly boosted the profile of his airport.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah. So that's the tale of Charlie Red Star.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a neat one. Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. You did the research, buddy.
I did. You guys can find us on Twitter at Canuckonomicon, where I'm usually posting about all sorts of weird stuff. You can also find us on Patreon, patreon.com/Canuckonomicon, and on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Canuckonomicon, where if you guys feel so possessed, you can throw us a few bucks, pay for our coffee and beer, help me upgrade my computer, because right now I am working off a janky 5-year-old laptop that is basically praying for death. So, please, I really could use the money. Yeah. Also, I buy a lot of books for this, because a lot of the books are available at my library, but a lot of them aren't, and so I end up buying a lot of ebooks. And so, any money you can send our way for this project, we would really appreciate. Do you have any pluggables to plug?
I don't have any pluggables, but we should have a Bring a Friend Day.
Yeah.
Where audience members bring a friend to listen to the Canuckonomicon.
I think Halloween would be a great time to do that, and that's going to have already passed by the time this episode is out.
Yeah, that is correct. Unless you want to, we release it
Thursdays.
Thursdays, that's right. That is Halloween.
Oh, hey, guys. It's Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
You should bug all your friends and tell them about this awesome podcast you're listening to called the Canuckonomicon, where you can learn about such thrilling topics as UFOs and large hairy men that live in the forest.
Yes, which we haven't even really covered yet.
Not exclusively. Although today I did realize that North America gets all the worst cryptids because all our cryptids are just variations on hairy men. And then South America, like Colombia, has the awesome
Chupacabra.
Puello Maligno.
Oh.
Puello Maligno. The evil chicken. I kid you not. That is a cryptid in Colombia. It lives in the forest, in the jungles, the rainforest, and may or may not be Satan, but most certainly does not like jokes or horses. So if you are ever in Colombia and you're riding around on a horse and telling jokes and singing songs, beware Pollo Maligno, the evil chicken.
Yes.
Pulo? I don't remember how to pronounce.
Pollo.
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 It is pollo.
El Pollo Loco.
El Pollo Maligno.
Yeah. Well, El Pollo Loco is a chicken chain in the States.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The crazy chicken.
I am terrible at languages that aren't English. I am barely competent at English. So, and I host a podcast and have an English degree. So, congratulations, Canadian education system.
There you go. Well, it's not our fault. You've been making up words since 1988.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. Y'all have a good day, and keep your eyes on the sky.
Yeah, keep your eyes open, folks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Canuckonomicon is a production of Crossing Clay Studios. We can be found on Twitter at Canuckonomicon, and you can contact us through email at canuckonomicon@gmail.com. Please be sure to share us with your friends and family, and keep your eyes open.